stream. Normally here on these fabulous Mondays, I get to sit in with my friends and with my co-hosts and a producer, and we put together these conversations for you. On Monday, we talk about news. Tuesdays, we talk about politics. Wednesday is Faith Day. Thursday, we talk about issues that matter so much to us in our society. And on Fridays, we talk about economics and science and all that. And it's great to partner with all those people. But today, I'm all alone. Just me. Just a guy in his basement talking to my friends around the internet. And so glad to have all of you aboard. So if you are part of this regular old community here and you want to let me know where you're listening from and watching from, I would love to know it. And thanks to all of you who do send us notes on who listen on the podcast. Those of you who are sending it to podcast@vocommongood.com. And those of you that send notes personally, because we're already connected, really good to hear from all of you. And those of you that like to chat in with us, we'd like to have you around as well. So, even though I am producing this today by myself, that I'm talking only to all of you and I don't have a conversation partner, I sure don't feel alone because I feel like I'm part of the Common Good community. And we hope you do as well. In fact, if you're watching this and you're watching it on any of our Facebook streams or on our Twitter stream or on Periscope or on Twitch or on all the places where this is happening, and you're not already connected to the Vote Common Good community, head over to vocommongood.com and fill out the form there, get on the email list. You will be pleased and surprised with all that you receive from us in our communication. There's a whole lot that goes on, and if you're feeling like you want to be part of a community like this, we would most certainly like that. And I'd love to know where you're coming from. So if you're in the chat today on the live stream, let us know. Hey, good morning, Jim. Good to see you here with us. So really glad to have all of you aboard. So much happening in our news. I wanted to start with January 6th. One of my commitments, and a number of people that are involved with the work that we do are committed to making sure that January 6th, the insurrection that was fueled by the big lie that Donald Trump actually won the election, and therefore what was happening in Congress was some sort of a violation of the law, a violation of the election, that continues to create negativity and pain and struggle in this country. And it's not going to go away. It's something that's going to be with us for a very long time. And for all of us in the country who look at this and say, it breaks my heart. I know that we're in a constitutional crisis. We can see that we have a former president of the United States that continues to gin up these issues, that people continue to believe that it was stolen, that there's recounts that are happening still in some bizarre way in Arizona and being talked about happening in other parts of the country. As much as we all experienced that pain from January 6th, and we all know that the rise up of a group of people to try to stop the certification of this election was painful to us, I was reminded this week just how painful it was to the Capitol Police. I was in Washington, D.C. A couple of days ago, and had the privilege of meeting with one of the officers who was part of protecting the Capitol on that day. His name's Harry Dunn. Harry has been very public about his work and his role. He's been on CNN a number of times. He's been on other podcasts, other news features, telling his story, talking about how hard it is to have to live with the ramifications of what happened 6 months ago. He talks about how it changed him physically, emotionally, spiritually, how it impacted his life, his mental health, his physical health. Every day he has to go back. And one of the things that he told me, and someday he'll be on this podcast and he'll tell you this himself, and he wanted me to convey this message to you, is he said, people ask me very often, he said, well, after protecting the Capitol at the insurrection and being involved in hand-to-hand combat that day and fighting for hours and being shocked and surprised by what happened and having to sort of engage all of a sudden as a peace officer who he sees himself as someone who wanted to help people, having to hurt people, that he had to fight, that he had to take on people with fire extinguishers and poles and people swinging their hands and fists and feet and swinging bike racks at him. He said people asked, well, what was your recovery time after that? How much time did you have off? And he said, we had none. We were back to work at 7:30 a.m. the next day. Just want you to let that settle in for a moment. On the afternoon of January 6th, people sent by the former president of the United States attacked the Capitol. They came with force. They came by thousands. They disregarded these officers. They overwhelmed them. They punched them. They hit them. In a violent set of attacks that was not at all anticipated. No one was gearing up that day. Nobody woke up that morning like maybe a soldier would, or a football player, or a mixed martial arts athlete, knowing that he's going to be punched that day. He's going to be attacked that day. People are going to threaten his life, that they're going to assault him verbally, physically, in all those ways. Just unfolded, just happened. For hours, he had to fight. And then had to be back to work at 7:30 the next day, standing in the very same spaces with those memories rolling through his mind. Like, you might be saying to yourself, well, I felt the same thing. I felt this happen, that I couldn't get the sights out of my mind. I've certainly watched so many clips. I've watched so much news source. I've watched, self-shot video, and it's really creeps into your spirit. Well, for Officer Dunn and all the other officers that were there that day, they weren't watching it on television. They were experiencing it, seeing it first person through their eyes. These weren't images of someone else being punched, kicked, attacked, overwhelmed, threatened. This was them being punched, kicked, attacked, overwhelmed, and threatened. And then they had to go back to work the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. So they were given a total of 16 hours of additional personal time. 16 hours that they could add to their vacation plan. This is what produces trauma in people's lives. So the trauma the country has felt, the trauma that our electoral process has felt, the trauma that so many of us know is embroiled right deeply in our hearts and spirits. Think about these Capitol Police officers who, if you've ever been to the United States Capitol, it would be like going to the Capitol of your own state if you've been there. There's a set of assigned officers that work for the department that protects that public space. These are people, as Officer Dunn told me, that are trained to constantly de-escalate. I asked him why he thought no officer other than the one that was right inside the Capitol trying to keep the first breaching fired their weapon. Why did they not pull their guns out? I don't know if you've asked yourself that question, but I've asked myself that question over and over. Knowing how often police officers on the street are trained that they can protect themselves by using deadly force. Why didn't they use deadly force on that day? That's a powerful question, right? Which I still don't know, even after talking with someone who was there as an officer, the full answer to this, other than they knew that that would not bring about the outcome that they wanted. The proper restraint was displayed. That they individually and collectively, without any plan, again, they didn't know this attack was happening. They didn't know this attack was coming. They didn't put together a plan that morning for what are they going to do when the insurrectionists choose to overrun the barriers and start attacking police officers and start beating them with whatever they have in their hands. They didn't have that plan in place to say, here's how we're going to escalate or not. They each made a choice to not become deadly violent toward the insurrectionists as they came that day. Can you imagine yourself being in a situation where you've been trained to bring about peace and de-escalation, and now you're overwhelmed with people who, again, were told, and I heard this firsthand from Officer Dunn, that these people said they were being sent by the police. They were being sent by the president. The president sent us. That's who they're listening to. They basically said to him, we have orders from over your head. You need to get out of our way. You're now interfering with an order of the president. This is the kind of stuff they were saying to him. And also calling him all kinds of racially driven names. We have to not allow the fact that the Republican Party doesn't want to talk about this issue anymore, the fact that all of us as a country want to lean into summer and not think about those final dark days for this country's experience of the Trump administration, that we want to sort of move on. I understand it. Boy, I do too. The last thing I want to do is mention the name of Donald J. Trump or talk about the insurrection or any of that. I am a future-focused person like many of you, and I would love to live in that world and not in the past. But it's rivetingly difficult for the personal experience of those who are having to live with the trauma that came to them that day. So as you think about the trauma in this country, as you think about the trauma in our electoral process, as we think about the long-term disease that is going to be caused by this incident, that the kind of contamination that happened to the body politic through the Trump administration, and then from January 3rd or November 3rd to January 6th, in that election day and post-election period, that particular period, the contamination that happened, if you want to borrow a metaphor, the way the body politic took in a toxin and has damaged this country, that the disease that is going to ravage the body politic is still fully unknown. We don't know the implication. You hear this with COVID. That's many people are experiencing long-term effects of the COVID virus. You'll hear it where you'll watch one of those commercials, if you watch cable TV enough like I do, about mesothelioma, right? That people were infected, asbestos infections. You think of people in the military that take on a toxin and they live with it, and in their body it ravages them for years and for decades. There was an infection injected into this country by the Trumpists and by the former president and the insurrectionists. The disease that's going to reap, the disease that's going to come from that, we don't know the implication of for the full body politic. And then for the people who were standing there that day, for the human tragedy that all of this was. And look, even for many of the insurrectionists themselves, we've given you news stories of people who are saying to themselves that they got whooped up in this thing. It's damaged them. One of the things you know is that those who do wrong and those who are wronged both experience incredible amounts of pain and consequence. It's just so unbelievably tragic at every level. So, boy, I know this isn't sort of the positive Monday news recaps that you get, but I was quite impacted by being at the Capitol now and walking by the Capitol Police and realizing that all those people standing there, they were almost all there on that day. They were taking it, and now they're just right back out there again, and that's got to get worked out. This is one of the most... When Officer Dunn said to me, we had no time off. Nobody thought a thing of all this. Broke my heart. Broke my heart. January 6th, can't leave our minds. The personal impact can't leave our consciousness, and we have to find ourselves a new pathway forward. Hey, and speaking of a new pathway forward, Vote Common Good, Greater Things Foundation are joining together to make a bike ride happen for new paths of immigration and new border practices possible. I know you've been hearing about this from me, and people are still a little confused, and I don't know if you have all the information you need, so maybe you need to head over to wethepeopleride.org, or you can go right to votecommongood.com or greaterthingsfoundation.org. Any of those websites, you can click on those, and you click on the tab in there that tells you about the We the People ride, and you're going to find out that we're riding our bicycles. Some of us all the way from San Diego, California, along the border down to Brownsville and McAllen, Texas, and then we'll transport up to Austin, Texas, and then make our way all the way across to St. Augustine, Florida, because we want to tell the story of the people most impacted, people along the way. We'd love for you to come with us virtually for a day, for a week. The whole time, 65 days, 3,200 miles. We'll take you. We'll be glad to have you along with us. So we're making that ride happen. WeThePeopleRide.org. You can find out all the dates, all the places we're going to be. Or maybe you can't come with us down to the border for a day, for a week or an hour, and maybe doing it virtually, following us along, doing your own bike rides. You don't want to do just alone. Maybe you want to put a community bike ride together. We'd love to have you do that. Put a community bike ride together in your own town. Fill out the form on the website. We'll be in touch with you about how you can do that. You can raise some money for refugees or for immigrants. You can not make it a fundraiser at all and just an awareness raiser. You can do it any way you want. What you're going to be hearing about, and I love to let the people on the podcast know this first, is that we are quickly confirming that we're going to be making a documentary about this whole process. A long-form doc, might even be a docuseries. Also, short documentaries, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute pieces that are going to come out from along the way that'll come out in near real time. Like, here's where we were yesterday, produce stuff that you can be sharing around. But then a longer form documentary or docuseries that we're going to put into all the places where normal documentaries go, that are going to tell the story of this ride and of all the people and all the beauty and all the struggle and all the bad practices and policies that can be made better. We're going to tell that story so that people around the country have another avenue into thinking about this. The reason I say that is because you might want to become a funder of a documentary. Maybe you're saying to yourself, I've always wanted to have my name on one of those documentaries. Well, I want you to have your name on one of these documentaries. I want you to have it on this We the People Ride documentary. So you're going to hear about chances to fund the documentary, make a financial contribution to be part of it. Now, maybe some of you are like, I'm a big time funder. I think of myself as, one of the major producers of documentaries, and I would like to contribute significantly and heavily to this. Well, I'd love to talk to you. Or if you know someone who's big into that. We have documentary teams together for both the long and short form. These are people I am so proud and so honored and so humbled and so I can't believe I'm talking to these people about this to work with. It's just going to be fantastic. So, the ride is something that we want you to be a part of, whether you can be on the border with us, you can ride with us virtually, you can do it in your own town by organizing an event, or you can be part of helping to make the telling of this story, the broadcasting of this ride possible for others by being part of the documentary team. So you keep your eyes open for social posts and get on our email list so that you find out about this, how you can be part of the documentary. And we're going to give you a chance to be like, you can fund a day of the documentary. So there'll be a day that will be your day. And when you watch that documentary, the long ones or the long form or the short form, you'll say, I made that day happen. That was my day. That was the day that I contributed and made happen. So we'd love to put you and a team together of people who are built around that day. So lots of things coming in that front. So WeThePeopleRide.org, again, is the place where you can find them. All right. Hey, more things are happening in the news as well. It's sort of on the newsy front. You know that the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is over doing the international things, meeting with the group of 7 of the largest, most wealthy documentaries, the largest and most wealthy democracies in the world. That's what they call the G7, the most influential ones that are all these democracies that are saying they want a different kind of a world to be together. These are important, these global leaders all meeting together. But you know what every global leader says when they do their press conferences? Maybe you heard Joe Biden say it yesterday was, all the power I have because I'm the leader of a democracy, all the power I have, it comes from the people. It comes from the people in my country. So even though you could say to yourself, hey, I'm glad Joe Biden's in charge of the federal government and not that other guy, and I'm glad that he's out there negotiating all this. I'm proud of his team. I think he's got a good thing going. I think he's got it together. Ultimately, he doesn't have the power unless you give him the power. Now, not you individually. I know that. We all know that our own one little voice, we can be hived off, but not when you link arms, not when you link intentions, not when you link actions with others. All of a sudden, all of us, we the people, not just we the person, not just me the guy, not just you the they, we the people join this country together, and then our representative speaks for us at the G7. So a lot's going to come out of this. There's a sense that a rather cynical person, of which I am quite familiar, being a cynical person, could say to themselves, what possibly comes out of these like international meetings, and they make all these all these promises. The United States is going to give 500 million doses of the vaccines, and all the other European and other G7 nations are going to join together, and they're going to contribute 500 million. So 1 billion doses are going to come out. And, look, if you've followed any of these big proclamations that happen by groups like this, when groups like this get together, you just find out, yeah, they didn't always come to fruition the way that they said it was going to, right? This is very common. But it still matters. Intentions matter. Statements matter. Because while every single intention that comes and every struggle that is holding up positive intentions at the G7, all the barriers to the fulfillment of the promises that will come into play, something will still happen. Without the intentions, without the meeting, without the promises, without the commitment to act, none of it's going to happen. So you can't compare all the promises to zero actions. You have to compare the promises to what would have happened had there not been those promises. So yeah, sure. Everything's not going to happen the way we want it to. Not everything is going to come to play. Is going to come to lived reality. But the fact that Biden is there, the fact that he's telling other countries he wants to join together, this is better, and good things are going to come. So we need. I am an internationalist when it comes to my view of how the United States should function in the world. That the United States should be part of a large global community. And these kinds of connections, the G7, NATO, other alliances, individual country agreements, extraordinarily important. One of the best things about being done with the other guy's view of the world is this, to move away from this America first nonsense and isolationism that first you deal with yourself. As if what our country should do is listen to the voices that want to sound like a pilot on an airplane that's reminding you to put your own mask on first before helping others. Well, I have no idea if that actually works in an airplane, because I've asked a number of flight attendants, hey, have you ever been in an airplane where the oxygen masks have come down? I haven't met one yet who's been in an airplane where the oxygen masks have come down. Obviously, they've been in, those have happened. I've just never met one. Perhaps you have. I don't know if it's really best practices to put your own mask on before you help others around you. I promise you, if I'm flying next to my grandkids, I'm putting their mask on first. There's not a chance I'm going to fuss around with mine while a little vulnerable child, who's got smaller lungs than I do, doesn't have a chance to start breathing that oxygen earlier. So I'm going to disregard that comment. And I'm certainly not going to let an America first, put your own mask on first kind of attitude be the attitude that we should have on our international and global affairs. So I'm so glad to see that the Biden administration is saying, we're not going to go for this us first, others later sort of attitude. There is no us without the others. That's the reason you don't do us first, because it just hogs in line. Do you remember when the other guy was president and at this very same meeting that Biden's at this year, and he walked by the leader of Montenegro, and they were in the crowd, and he wanted to step in front, and he grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back and stepped in front of him, like that physical representation of us first. I'm going to get out in front. It's just so glad that that's over with. But even though it's not represented in our federal government, elected federal government currently, it's alive and well in our country, and we got to call it out. I think the great admonition that for those of us that follow the Christian tradition find inside of the Christian scriptures of do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, that's a pretty good way to live as a nation as well. Don't act selfishly. Act in life with others. And so that's what we're trying to do as a country. I hope that's where we end up as a country, that we join our efforts together. And then, that Biden is going to meet with Putin this week. And, all the best on that. I just think this country gives way too much attention to Vladimir Putin. I know it's important, but man, the way all of us sort of get ourselves riled up about what's happening there with Putin is it needs to step back a bit. So all the best to Joe Biden in the work that he's doing and how he's going to try to navigate all of this. Now, when he gets back, there's going to be this big question about the infrastructure plan and this big question about the voting rights bills. I don't know anything more than what's just in the news, but my sense is there are people working on solutions to both of these. I think there's going to be good legislation that's going to come forward in the next 60 to 90 days on both the issues of voter protection and on infrastructure. Now, why infrastructure continues to be such a problem in this country is just a real sign that things are not designed to work the way they're supposed to. That the infrastructure of Congress is not working the way that it's supposed to make sure that good, solid infrastructure happens in the country. It's just a battle that is obviously continuing to be waged for reasons that I can't possibly understand. The fact that the Republicans, when they had control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Do you remember this back in 2017, 2018? They didn't do infrastructure. And then when they had control of the Senate and the White House, they didn't do infrastructure. And now that there's a majority in the House for Democrats and Democrats have the White House and it's a tie in the Senate to be broken by the vice president. So a technical control of the Senate. They're still struggling to do it. What's going on? Now, I know with the Trump people, they didn't care. They were never going to help anybody. They were never going to spend any money. They couldn't even get a plan together to have infrastructure week without Donald Trump blowing the whole thing up there. Their incompetence was only matched by their cruelty. But maybe that's not the only reason, because you can see that with the new administration and a new control of the Senate, there's still struggle to get this thing done. So something's broken in that whole system. Let's spend some money on roads and Wi-Fi and all the rest. Yeah, and look, some of you know that we've been saying around here though since we've been running this podcast that the internet needs to become a public utility that everybody has access to, whether you can pay for it or not. That's almost there in the infrastructure bill. Man, I think it would just be one of the greatest things that we could do as a country is to guarantee people access to the internet that is paid for separately from your own individual bank account paying for your own subscription rate. Now, you could upgrade to something better or faster or more if you want, but everywhere you go in this country, there should be internet available to everyone that's paid for out of funding that's different than just a subscription model to a fee. The fact that we all tolerate this, that we've been putting up with this on our cell phones and on our home internet and on our office internet is just madness. We need to make the internet available at a reasonable speed for no additional cost to any individual other than what people already pay through their civic and federal payments. And that's that. Now, that's not quite there in this infrastructure bill, but the seeds of it are there. And that is one of those things, the way people talk about healthcare, that healthcare is something that you should be able to access without only, even if you can't afford it. Yes. And the same thing needs to be true with the internet. And the internet is so much cheaper than healthcare. Just do it. It's one of those things that you just makes you think, is it simply for a lack of vision that we're not doing this? Make it like the friggin' national parks. Make it like the public highway system. Make it like the natural resources that we can all access. Just build the infrastructure, give everyone access to it, pay for it out of the federal government, fund that federal government spending through local municipalities, and in the other places, run it through the federal government, and just have a web of internet everywhere that you don't have to pay for. Why every business, why every individual is not asking for that? Look, if you were to look up and down your street where you live, now, those of you that live out in the woods and in the prairies, look inside your county. But you look up and down your street or down your county, and you think every one of these houses, every one of them, is likely paying for their own internal internet in their house. They're paying some router, they're paying for some deal, or maybe they have a subscription to some service that's provided by the city. Every one of them's paying for internet in their own house. And then my guess is every one of those houses also has people that have an iPhone or an Android phone. And that's a separate plan, which they're also paying for the internet on. So the places that, a few places they're not going to have any internet in their house, but they're going to just have it on their cell phone, and they're going to have these huge cell phone bills. Every house, save a few, is running internet in the house that they're paying for, running internet on their phone that they're paying for. And then a lot of those people, they work for a company that when they go to the office, there's another internet subscription and fee that's being paid. A lot of people in this country are accessing 3 different payment systems. Their company's paying for it, they're paying for it so they have it in their house, and they're paying for it on a mobile device. Every company would benefit by there being utility level internet that does not cost you a separate fee. The amount of savings that would be is incredible. If you paid a fractional increase in taxes for some infrastructure that covered things, including the internet for everyone, it would be so much cheaper than the business, the household, and the mobile phone payments that are going into the internet. In fact, if you're watching this or listening to this right now, you're accessing it through the internet, and you just do your own little count on how many ways you're paying for the internet, it's outrageous. So why we don't all band together and say, hey, let's restructure this whole thing. Now, sure, that's going to come as a cost cut to internet providers. Fair enough. Let's go ahead and do that, because the infrastructure of the internet is the thing that the entire economy could run on and be benefiting from. And look, and then if you want something more, if you want additional access, go ahead. But make it more like street lights and a little bit less like a Netflix subscription. Make it a little bit more public and a little bit less, well, that's a real want. Move that sucker into the land of needs. I just think it would be the greatest thing we could do. Just look, if all of us just start, and this is not a particularly common good argument that I'm making, but just ask every politician, hey, do you think we could have a government-funded internet that everyone can access? What would it take for us to get that? Just start asking the question over and over until it becomes so obvious that that's what we should have, because there's no reason for us now not to have that. It's just bananas, if you ask me. So we need that to happen. Hey, just a couple of quick comments here on what's happening with the DOJ now, Inspector General investigation into the Department of Justice, looking into the phone records of Congressman Swalwell and Schiff. Maybe you know this all happened. Big news, super nerdy, like all the people who are really, wound up around the rules of Congress and the rules of the presidency are shaking their fists at how bad it is. So if it doesn't get you fired up yet, you don't know that's a problem, let me just be your proxy for you and say it's a serious problem that the use of the Department of Justice and the use of subpoenas and looking at people's records to find out who they were talking to, both the press, individuals, and members of Congress, is a real problem. I'm not one of those big privacy guys. I'm no Edward Snowden here that's really, overly worried about the government's intrusion into our private information. But there is a line. There's a very clear line. And whatever judge, whatever Department of Justice lawyer suggested that it was reasonable to not only look at the records of Congressman Swalwell and Congressman Schiff and maybe others, and then not tell them about it and keep a gag order in place for years, is really a problem. I don't know where all the libertarians are on this one. I don't know why they're not squawking up. I don't know where all the government intrusion crowd is on all of this. It sure seems to me that this would be the time when we should hear from some of those folks. I mean, they're always out there when you don't need them. And now here we have an issue that's so important. And, I just say to my libertarian friends, man, could you possibly care about something that's for the common good and not just that frees you up to do the stuff you want to do? Like, couldn't your libertarian impulses for once be about collectivism and collective goodness and not just about getting the collective off your back? This would be one of those times, just another opportunity presented to the libertarians to care about the rest of us. Let your liberty drive you to the common good, libertarians. We'd love to see that. Hey, some good news on the vaccines. As you know, the vaccines now are starting to move all around the world. They're happening, and everywhere in this country where vaccine rates are up, of course, coronavirus cases are down, the infrastructure is safe, and we're starting to move along. And I read a nice little article that had this great idea that said, hey, maybe the way we're arguing for the non-vaxxers to consider getting a vaccine is having the Moderna, the Pfizer, the J&J vaccine is way better than the other version of the vaccine that you can get. The other version of the vaccine, contracting the COVID SARS-2 virus. That's another way you can be vaccinated and get the immunity. Now, the J&J vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, it ain't going to make you sick. I mean, it might make you feel a little queasy for a day, but it's not going to hurt you. Getting COVID, pretty good chance that's not going to treat you very well. So it's not an issue of, do you want the vaccine or do you not want the vaccine? The question is, do you want to be vaccinated in a way that's not going to make you sick, or do you want to be vaccinated in a way that's going to make you sick? I think that's a great argument. I like that one. I know it's not going to motivate everybody because they're pretty sure it's not going to happen to them. And every couple of days, I read a news story about some anti-vaxxer. Recently, I read one about a person in Congress just wasn't going to get it because, by golly, something's going to make me sick. And then got COVID and is like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. Things are really, really bad. You should get the vaccine. So, whether you come around at the first hour or you come around at the 11th hour, glad to have you aboard. But it'd just be a better argument for people to say, not because it's going to help. I think we're beyond the point where the argument can be, it helps everybody else, right? People that are not motivated by that a week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, they're not going to be motivated by it tomorrow. But maybe they're going to be motivated by the idea that, it's better for me just to get the vaccine than to get the COVID, as my friends in New York like to refer to it. Because you get the COVID, that's way worse than getting the vaccine. So is that where we are? Are we at a place now where people are just going to be like, well, you either get the vaccine or you get COVID? And to all those, look, I know a lot of people are asymptomatic, think like, I got it, it was no big deal. So if you're one of those people that's just like, no, it's like the flu, okay, let's see how that goes for you. I think you're better off not getting it. I don't know why you want to be sick for a week, for a day, for a month with COVID, and to get your immunity built that way, because you don't even get as good of immunity that way. It's just really, really something. All right. So final bit here for the day on the news is the question, what is a lie? It's my little editorial commentary. What's a lie? Now, you might think, well, that's silly. It's obvious what a lie is. I don't think it is as obvious what a lie is. Now, there's a lie when you experience one. It's a lie when you find out that something's not true that you were told was true by people who knew it was not true. Now, one experience of a lie is that you're just given bad information. And I think sometimes we're a little loose with calling something a lie, which is just bad information. So someone telling you something that they believe to be true, which turns out not to be true, I don't think you should call that a lie. I think you should say you had bad information or you were told something that wasn't true. There's a difference in my mind between something not being true, not being accurate, not being correct, and something being a lie. And it has to do with a relationship. I think a lie requires this set of conditions. that a person has the right to information that they want, and another person does not give them the information that they have a right to and that they want. Not giving the information that you have to someone who has the right to it and the desire to have it. Both of those conditions have to be met, in my view, for it to be a lie. And lies are more powerful, lies are more damaging, lies are more harmful than someone not giving you the truth that they didn't have, that they didn't know. So if someone's told you something repeatedly that they thought was true, I don't think we should call that a lie. I think we should put that in a category, and I think it matters because it's not a relational harm, and the way you solve for it, the way you solve for misinformation is different than the way you solve for a lie. And I think we're better off first dealing with lies and later getting to misinformation as a society. They work hand in hand because the more you tolerate lies, the more lies that exist in the world, then the more misinformation is compounded. So lies become misinformation. So the best place to deal with it is not at the misinformation side. And what I mean is not by people who believe they're telling you the truth, but the information is wrong. The best place to deal with it is from the people who know this information is not true. They're not giving the right information to people who have a right to it and who want it. That's the best place to deal with it, because that one you can actually deal with. Misinformation, stuff's always going to be inaccurate. I mean, we're never going to get to a lack of inaccuracy. I'm going to slip on my postmodern hat for a minute and say, look, all truth that you're going to get is contingent, is marginalized, is rooted in a story. None of it is perfectly accurate. There is no pure truth. But that's not what we mean by accurate information. You can get accurate information without some purity of truth. Lying is so far away from accurate information because what it does is it says that a person who has a right to information is not given that information. Here's why I think that's important. Because there is some information, some data, some fact that you have a right to, that you should know. And distinguishing whether you have a right to it or not is a big deal about a lie. Do you remember maybe, I don't know, when you were a teenager or a kid, you were given this ethical question. If a person came to your door and they had a weapon in their hand and they said, are the members of your family home? Because if the members of your family are home, I'm going to harm them. And they ask you that question. And then this moral, ethical, dilemma says, what would you do? Would you lie to them and let your family be harmed? Or would you lie to them and protect your family? Or would you tell them the truth and let your family be harmed? How committed are you to the truth? I don't know if you've heard this dilemma. I've heard it many a time. Some version of this. That's when I first heard this, when I first started thinking about, well, I think the person who comes to the door with intentions to harm people that are in my house, I have no moral obligation to give them this information. They have no right to this information. It's not a lie for me to say anything. A lie requires moral responsibility and the right of the person to have the information. So I don't have to tell them this. There's no lie in place. I could say yes, no, maybe, wrong house. It doesn't matter. The information I give them is not a lie because they have no right to it. There's a lot of information that's like this. If your neighbor says, hey, what'd you do last night? You don't have to tell your neighbor unless your agreement with your neighbor is that you tell your neighbor what you do, and they feel that they have a relational or personal or legal right to it. If your spouse says to you, what'd you do last night? It's likely you likely have a responsibility to tell that person what you did last night, right? Because the person matters. It's not just about the information. We're not just information depositories that hold and dispense information. There's a personal responsibility, a right to have that information. Now, this doesn't let people off the hook any more than it puts people on the hook, because there's a lot of people who don't tell other people the truth. They tell them a lie because they don't give somebody the information that they have a right to. If you're standing at a food place and you see someone put some poison in the buffet, and another person comes up and is about to eat the now poisoned food, I think you have an obligation and a right to tell that person that they should not eat that. Now, if you're just standing at a regular old buffet and somebody comes up and they're going to eat food you don't want them to eat because you don't think they should eat that kind of food, or you think they've eaten too much, or whatever your reason is, you don't have a right to tell them not to eat it, because the obligation to not tell them, or for them not to eat the food, and for you to tell them not to eat the food, is not set on your opinion, because they don't have a right to your opinion. But morally, they have a right to be protected if you have information that would protect them. Now, it's not always clear when it's a right and when it's not, and all this. This is the moral dilemma that we have. So there's a right to the information that they should have. And then there's a desire to have that information. Does the person want it? This is where it gets really intriguing, because there's a lot of people who want information they don't have a right to. And there's some people who have a right to information, but they don't want it. You could imagine somebody getting a diagnosis of an illness. Now, they have a right to that information, but they may not want it. If the doctor withholds the information because the person says, I don't want it, the doctor's not deceiving and is not lying. If the person says, I want it, and the doctor doesn't give it, there's now a lie in place. There's now deceit involved. So the obligation to deliver the information to a person who has a right to have it, and the desire of that person to have that information, are both important. There's a whole lot of conditions by which somebody might say, like, I just don't want to know. I have the right to it, but I don't want to know about it. Back to the example of, what'd you do last night? Well, a spouse might have a right to the information, but they might not want to know it. Hey, what'd you do with your friends? Can you just leave it there? I don't even want to know. Please don't even tell me about it. I'm uninterested at this point for a whole variety of reasons, right? So the right to the information and the desire to have the information. Here's why this matters in our civic and political life. Our government spokespeople, press secretaries, they're always having to determine, what do you have a right to and what do people want? Kelly McEnany, who used to work for the other guy, said, I never lied to anybody. I never said something that wasn't true. Here's why she's a liar. Here's why Donald Trump is a liar and how they function in their lives. Because they gave people information that was inaccurate, and the inaccuracy was something they knew was inaccurate, and they delivered that inaccurate information to people who had a right to know it and a desire to know it. That's called a lie. So a lie is not just saying the opposite of the truth. A lie is not saying all that is true that people have a right to know and a desire to receive it. I think all this is important because we need to have a relational approach to truth-telling. Individually, interpersonally, in our families, in our communities, and with our government. You can't possibly deliver accuracy at every moment, but you can give accurate information to people who have the right to it and who have a desire to receive it. AOC was on one of the morning news shows yesterday, and Alex was asked the question, as a congresswoman, what does she think about this particular issue? She's incredibly forthcoming. The more I see her and interact with her, the more I like her. And she said, you're kind of raising that question right now. I haven't really thought a lot about it, but I'm leaning toward yes on that. That's where I am. She determined that the way to be honest, the way to tell the truth, the way not to lie, wasn't simply to say, I haven't considered that question. She thought, and I really appreciate this, she would say, this is new to me. I haven't really looked at it, but I'm going to tell you where I'm at right now hearing it, where my impulse is on this. Leaning towards yes, but that might change because, I might find out something more. But I think what you're getting at, interviewer, is where do I find myself right now? And I want to be totally forthcoming as much as I possibly can about that. Incredibly helpful. Now, she knows things as a congressperson that she can't tell people because they don't have a right to it. She knows classified information. People want it. She knows it. She can't tell you. That's not a lie. That's not even dishonesty. That's fulfilling the responsibility of not giving to people things they don't have a right to. But she thought it was appropriate to say, people have the right to know where I sit on this currently right now and sort of hearing it. That's why they have me on a news program. That's what I'm here to do. I'm going to be as truthful as I possibly can at every moment. I think that's a great way for all of us to think about this. As Jermaine in the chat says, don't give misinformation intentionally. To those who have a right to it, I would add, and to those who want it. Your opinion, something a lot of people might not want. You might think they have a right to it. You might think your opinion is important enough. I'm certainly one of those people. I mean, I look at a camera, for a few hours every week and tell people what I think about things. Yeah. I want to give information to people who I hope want it. Shouldn't do the same thing when I'm just standing in line at a public place. Just turn to them and say, hey, you want to know what I think a lie is? I think a lie is when you intentionally give people information that's not accurate, who have a right to deserve it and a desire to receive it. Like that in and of itself is like, what are you doing, man? This is not a place to be talking about. Like, I'm uninterested. Why are you doing this thing with me right now? Or when someone asks me something that they clearly have a right to and a desire for. That's why in the Miranda rights, when you're arrested or approached by an officer of the state, it is clearly communicated that you have the right to remain silent. There's no information you have to give to anybody in the government until they prove their right to give it. And if the information could incriminate you, you have a right enshrined in the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution to not tell them that. Legally, you have a right to not tell them. Now, morally, you might not have a right to not tell a friend or a neighbor or a family member or a spouse or someone else. That might be different. But if it's somebody in positions of power with the power of the federal government, that's restrained by it's not a lie if you don't tell us. Now, they'll call you in under oath, and then you would have to invoke specifically that amendment and say, I'm not going to share anything more because I'm now going to block your right to receive that information. It's really important. The Fifth Amendment and the increased Miranda rights to not speak on any issue at all that you don't want to somebody who has the power of the government is incredibly important. The obligation for members of the government does not work the same way. They don't get to claim Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate their administration or the Department of Justice or the police officers. It doesn't work the other way. So it's my little editorial, a little philosophical class on what is a lie and what is not a lie. And I hope it calls all of us to more relational connection and to thinking about the things that we say, the things that we consume in our media, the things we demand from one another to be better and more accurate. And I think it's the only way that our news ever becomes good and trustworthy is when we can have confidence in it, that the information we want to receive and the information we have a right to receive, we do receive. Anything short of that, it's a lie. This is why Donald Trump was tagged with more than 30,000 lies. He intentionally said things to people that was not accurate. He knew it was not accurate. They had a right to the information, and they desired it. That's what makes it a lie. May we be done with the lying in this society, in this country, individually, personally, collectively, and again at the government level. So we hope that you found a little common good news around here. Thanks for all of you in the spaces on the chat, and all of you that sent emails, and I don't know if you send voice memos or something else. We'd always appreciate those as well. We'd love to see you on the email list. And if you don't already know that if you're only watching this live, that we run a podcast, you can go to votecommongood.com/podcast. That's where you subscribe. You can also share that link with your friends and all the rest, and get on our email list if you're not already on there, because we do want to stay in touch with you and count you as a member of the common do-gooders, where we all find ourselves. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. We're back with politics. And it'll be a fine day for you to join us. And then Wednesday for faith, Thursday for topics. We're going to be talking with Paula Stone Williams on her story of what she learned when she transitioned in her presenting gender from male to female, and how she's learned and understood herself and the world that she lives in. And then we'll be back with astrophysicist Paul Wallace on Friday. So thanks for being a part of the Common Good podcast, and we will talk to you tomorrow.